we are going to take a look at two-dimensional arrays in Java. So here I'm declaring a two-dimensional array called seats, and notice I used square brackets twice here, so it's really an array of arrays is really what a two-dimensional array is. So here's my array called seats. It's an array of string objects, and here I'm initializing it to these names, obviously, and I'm using these curly brackets. Now if this was a one-dimensional array, of course you would only have one set of curly brackets, but it's a two-dimensional array, and really in Java a two-dimensional array is an array, and you can see these outer curly brackets here. It indicates it's an array, and within that array I have these three other arrays, all of strings. So really a two-dimensional array is an array of arrays. Hopefully that makes some sense. Now it's possible actually to have these inner arrays of different lengths. You will not see that on the AP exam. On the AP exam, all of these inner arrays, notice they're all of length 4. That will be the case. They will all be of the length 4. Java does allow, it's called ragged arrays. They do allow arrays of different lengths, but again, you will not see that on the AP exam. You're going to assume that they're all these nice rectangular arrays, a nice grid. So let's just go through how I would access something in the array. So let's see, I want to see who sits in row 1. You have to, hopefully you'll get your rows and columns straight. Rows, of course, go across like this, and columns go up and down. So who sits in row 1, column 2? So I'm just going to print out in this print line statement, seats 1, 2 in square brackets like this. Now remember, you start counting at 0, so row 1 is really this row, right? This is row 0, row 1, and seat 2 would be 0, 1, 2. I should get Tom being printed out. And then I'm going to print out a few other things. The number of rows, and this can be confusing to students, the number of rows is really just the length of this array. So seats.length tells me the number of elements in this outer array. In other words, there's 3 inner arrays here, so I should get the seats.length is 3. Now if I ask for the length of each individual row, seats 0, seats 1, seats 2, here I am, to be very clear, I'm asking for the length of these inner arrays. Now when I say the inner arrays, I mean like that's an inner array, that's an inner array, that's an inner array, and then this sort of the outer array is these outer curly brackets. So seats 0.length is the length of this row. It happens to be 4. Row 1 also is 4. Row 2 also is 4. And actually, I'm just going to print. Let's give this a run, and we'll see what's going on here, just to make sure it all works. Yes, and as I said, who sits in row 1, column 2? That's Tom. The number of rows is 3, and of course, they're all the same columns. And once again, that will always be the case on the AP exam, that all of the columns, or rather, all of the rows will be the same length. So you're always going to have the same number of columns. There, if that makes sense. So here, after that, I'm going to show how you would print out an array in what is called row major order. Row major order, which kind of makes sense. It's in row order. Now you're going to need a nested for loop to print out a two-dimensional array. So here I'm saying go from row 0 to seats.length, and again seats.length is really telling me the number of rows, right? There's 1, 2, 3 rows. And then my inner for loop, I'm calling this variable column. I'm going to go from 0 to rather less than seats 0.length. So I'm going less than the length of one of these inner things here. Now I could of course call this seats 1.length or seats 2.length if I wanted to, but because they're all going to be the same. But I'm using seats 0.length. Because I know that my two-dimensional array at least has a first row, if that makes sense. So then I'm printing out. Notice this is not a print line; it's just a print. I'm printing out whoever sits in a row column with a tab. \T gives me a tab, and then when I get to the end of the row, it drops out of this inner for loop, and I have a print line statement to go to the next row, and so forth. So that's why I'm getting these names in row major order, just like you see it up here. Underneath it, and I know I'm going a little quick, maybe you won't have to play this on 1.5 speed. Underneath it, I'm printing out my array in what is called column major order. I'm going down the columns. So you can see that I'm printing, like Jim, Pam, Ann is my first column. I'm printing it across the screen. So this is called column major order. I'm going down the columns. And you'll notice the only thing that I really did was switch the two for loops here, order of them. In other words, I moved this one down and this one up. So I'm going from column 0 to seat 0 dot length, and then my inner for loop is from row 0 to row seats dot length. Just switch these two. So now I'm incrementing the rows first. My column is, I'm staying at column 0 and I'm going row 0, row 1, row 2, and that's the order which I'm printing out. Hopefully, give that some thought. Hopefully that makes sense, but this is something that you're going to have to be able to do. Print out your two-dimensional array in row order or in column order. I just want to go over one more thing real quick. And this is, here I have another two-dimensional array. This is a two-dimensional array of integers called nums. So here's my two-dimensional array, int nums, two-dimensional array. And here it is, it's just a 3 by 3 two-dimensional array. And here I'm using a for each loop to print out my two-dimensional array. And actually I'm going to total up each row. So remember how for each loops work? This says for each integer array, and this is my variable name, for each integer array row in nums. Nums, again, is the name of my two-dimensional array, and row is my variable. And int array is because each row is really an integer array. So I hope that works for you. So for each integer array row in nums, I'm now going to traverse each row, which itself is an array. So here I have a variable I'm initializing to 0, total is 0, and in this inner for loop, I have another for each int val is the variable name in row. Remember, row is the name of my one-dimensional array here, and I'm now just traversing across that row. So I'm going to end up adding up everything in this first row. Then when I get to the end of this for loop, it's going to print out the row total and then go to the next line. And then again, it's going to get the next row, which is, of course, this row, and it's going to do it again. So this is how you would print out a two-dimensional array in row major order using a for each loop. And I'm going to run this, and you'll see it'll work beautifully. And I know I'm going quick, but I think what you need to do is just play around with these a little bit and convince yourself, if you're familiar with nested for loops, convince yourself that it's printing it out in row major order, or in this case in column major order. So that's it. Get to work on the project.